Blech. So this is from Vice. I hate Vice. I really hate Vice, but we're just going to go with it because this is a Legs McNeil article, and I love Legs McNeil. He's a great author, great journalist. Legs McNeil wrote this on December 31st, 2013 at 10 a.m. Art by Brian Walsby. I know Brian Walsby. Well, I don't know him, but I know of him. I love what Legs McNeil says about Gigi Allin. This is how I feel about Gigi Allin to an extent. By the way, this article is called Gigi Allin's Last Day on Earth. I never paid much attention to Gigi Allin when he was alive because I thought he was a talentless bottom feeder who would do anything to get attention. Consequently, I never bothered with his music and stayed away from reading about him. I mean, compared to my pals in the Ramones, what could Allin possibly have to offer? Gigi seemed like a spectacular mess who was just taking up space until he ended himself. I didn't really need any more garbage heaps in my life, but after he died, my best friend Tom Hearn told me that he had hung out with Gigi a few times in New Haven, Connecticut, and that he was a nice guy. Really? I asked Tom, intrigued that I let my preconceived notions keep me from checking Allin out. I love it when my prejudiced ideas get shattered and I have to take another look. Yeah, Tom told me. He was like this incredible asshole on stage, just fighting and screaming and shitting on everyone. But off stage, he was really nice. He was kind of like a more violent, fucked up version of Joey Ramone. You know how Joey was so incredibly focused on stage? And then when we were hanging out with him, he was funny as shit. Well, Gigi was kind of like that. I thought maybe I was wrong about the guy. And this is maybe where I disagree with Legs McNeil. Legs says, when I was doing a reading tour of the South last winter, I became friendly with Johnny Puke from Charleston, South Carolina, where he books and manages the Tin Roof, a fun, dumpy punk club. Johnny told me that he was with Gigi the night he died, and I thought it would be an interesting story to get on tape. So I asked Johnny if I could interview him sometime. Johnny said yes, and last October, just as it was getting really cold outside, I headed back to Charleston to interview Johnny Puke. This is his report. Getting stories on tape, I feel like it's really important work. And, whether it's about someone as unsavory as Gigi Allin, because again, the most interesting thing about Gigi Allin is his last day on earth. The irony that this guy wanted to end himself, but didn't end himself because he did it accidentally. Gigi Allin's final mission, which he was trying to accomplish before he went to prison, was that he would do his final performance on Halloween night of 1991 and then off himself on stage. So people began making plans to find out where that show was going to be because of all these people who wanted to see Gigi Allin end it on stage, or at least see what was going to happen. But what happened, of course, was that he was in prison on Halloween for the next few years. So this made his promise null and void. I had heard of Gigi Allin long before that because of Maximum Rock and Roll magazine, but they always just said that he was this vile, offensive jerk, not worth your time. And when you're a little kid, you took what Maximum Rock and Roll said seriously, because they were the last word in punk. But when I got into college, I started to think outside of the confines of what punk magazines were telling me I was supposed to think. Mind you, this is also pre-internet. This is how you're getting your news, right? So you got to listen to Maximum Rock and Roll because unless you're at the show, you don't have an account of what happened. You know what I mean? I started writing to Gigi and we got friendly through the mail. I must have written him over 100 letters. He wasn't particularly living anywhere. He was staying in Chicago with this really cool girl, Sharon Rose, who kept a permanent address for him. He wasn't really playing that much. But then he wrote me that he was coming to New York to play a show and invited me up. I was probably a 12 or 13-hour drive from West Virginia, and I decided I'm going to do it because this really was my entry into punk rock, When Gigi got out of jail, the rumor resumed, and everybody was looking forward to seeing Gigi off himself. I talked to Gigi about it a little bit, but he was never really forthcoming with me. Sometimes he would give me a vague answer. Once he said that fire was going to be involved. He hinted to me that he might take other people out with him. I'll tell you this, Merle said that when it came down to that final show, that the murder junkies weren't going to be in on it because Merle wasn't going to knowingly play a final show where he knew that his brother was going to end himself. By this time, 1992, I was living in New York and I started hanging out with Gigi and Dee Dee Ramone, who was living at the Chelsea Hotel at the time. Dee Dee was going to be the guitar player for Gigi's band. But that lasted about a week because obviously it wasn't going to work out. Then there was the last year of his career. I think all these people thought maybe tonight is going to be Gigi's last night because now he wasn't saying he was going to off himself on Halloween. He was saying you get what you deserve and you get it when you deserve it. He was saying, I'm not going to do anything based on what you want me to do or when you want me to do it. I'm going to do it when I want to do it. So that added to the excitement of every one of these shows. These people were on a death trip, paying $10 a head to see if maybe this guy was going to off himself tonight. Instead of like actually focusing on writing good music or doing something that's interesting in some way, shape, or form, he's just being like, hey, I'm going to do this on stage and you're coming to my shows and paying money to come see me because you're hoping to see bloodshed. That's why you're doing this. You're not doing this because there's nothing about me artistically interesting. You just like watching a freak show. And that's why I think Gigi Allen sucks. The final show, though we didn't know it was the final show, it was booked at the gas station in the East Village, which was this sort of a sculpture place directly across the street from my apartment on Avenue B and 2nd Street. I lived there with my girlfriend, and Gigi was in town with his girlfriend, a young girl named Liz, a pretty cool chick who was following him around. When he first got back to New York, he tried to stay with Merle, but Merle was getting sick of him. So he and Liz had checked into the St. Mark's Hotel, and that's where he was staying. So Gigi says to me, tomorrow we'll come over to your place before the sound check. We'll sort of use your place like a dressing room and then we'll go to the show and we'll hang out later. The next day, Gigi came over really early, like noon or 1 o'clock, and the whole band was there. And Richard Kern came by to take photographs. So the friggin' Richard Kern was there taking photographs. I didn't know that. People were coming and going all day. So the band was hanging out and we don't have anything to do because the sound check keeps getting pushed back later and later. I was like, I'm bored. Let's get some Coke. So I go to one of these little deli places that sells Coke across the street. You know how that goes. Now, every 45 minutes, I'm going back across the street for another bag of blow. So we're drinking beer and listening to music and actually having a really good afternoon. By this point, Gigi is getting really wired. We're all getting really wired, but he gets super wired before a show. Gigi had an internal process he went through where he just ratcheted himself up to be 10 foot tall and ruthless so that he could perform. And the Coke was adding to that. We went over to do the sound check around 5 or 6, and there was time to do the show. A bunch of bands had played, but we had been over in my apartment doing Coke and missed them. Gigi gets on stage and immediately breaks a microphone. So the sound guy says, show's over. I'm not going to do this. There's all these people there, and Gigi is furious. He starts yelling at the sound guy and threatening him. So the sound guy and his dog barricaded themselves in the sound booth behind this steel gate, and Gigi's throwing mics at him and calling him a pussy and trying to call him out. Somehow, Gigi got another mic and the show went on for a little while. It was a 3-song show and Gigi was on fire. He punched out a couple of people and then he shit on himself and then smeared it all over everything and then was throwing shit at people. That's a great way to spend your last day on Earth. There were about 200 people there, and right after the show started, they all ran for the courtyard. So there's only about 10 people left watching the show. Those are the people that did not mind getting smeared with shit and feces. Somebody got punched out and there was a scuffle, and now Gigi doesn't have a mic. He was frustrated that he's not even going to be able to perform on the show that he has ratcheted himself up for. So he starts taking it out on the crowd. He chases the people out to the courtyard yelling, "They won't even let me finish my show." Gigi was trying to attack anyone that's close. So the crowd got angry, mad that they waited all afternoon and didn't even get to see the headliner. They were out in the courtyard where there was a recycling container full of bottles, and they just started throwing the bottles. It was raining Molotov cocktails, and we were having to duck and try to figure out how the fuck we're going to get out of there. So Gigi chased the crowd out of the courtyard and onto the street, which became a riot of crazy people screaming and yelling. There were like 75 to 100 people out on the street flipping out. Gigi was wearing Liz's short skirt, no underwear, and these combat boots. covered in blood and shit. Then Gigi lay down in front of a city bus on Avenue B, and the bus couldn't pass. Everybody was running around like crazy. Gigi was laying down in the street, and by now we can hear the cops coming. Gigi tried to get away, but he wasn't super New York savvy, and was having trouble to find his way back to the St. Mark's Hotel. The whole crowd was following him, and the police were following him, and he's wearing a skirt with no underwear, covered in shit. Gigi was trying to walk down Avenue B, and there was kind of a march that he's leading. But Gigi didn't want to be leading a march. He just wanted to get away. He yelled, "Quit following me, quit following me." But they didn't stop following him. He hailed a cab in front of a bank, gets in, and the cabbie freaked out. The cabbie was just skeeved out and he wouldn't go. So they had to get out of the cab. Meanwhile, there's people on the four corners of the block screaming and yelling while the cops were looking for who's causing this ruckus. Finally, Gigi hailed another cab safely and made it back to the St. Mark's Hotel. Me, my girlfriend, and the band went out to eat at this barbecue place right on Houston, and I was going to catch up with Gigi later. The promoter of the show had given Gigi a bundle of dope, which is 10 little bags. So Gigi had the dope, and he told me, "I'll find you later and we'll go back to your house and we'll party." So I go to the St. Mark's Hotel to collect Gigi and Liz, but he's with Bobby Ebbs from Genocide, who was a Gigi Allin nut and a real hanger-on. That's strange to me that's like that, who just wanted to be around Gigi, hoping he'd buy drugs for him and his girlfriend. Gigi was really happy to see me walk up and say, "Let's get the fuck out of here right now." At about 11:30, we took a cab and went back to my apartment to start partying. It was just me, my girlfriend, Gigi, and Liz. And Gigi's got all this dope from the promoter, and we start snorting it. And I think Gigi would have preferred to shoot it, but I didn't do that. I was phobic of needles. So he knew I was just a big snorter, and we were drinking Jim Beam and running across the street and getting more beers. It was a good night. We were talking about arranging a spoken word tour of Europe for both of us. Neither Gigi nor I had ever been to Europe, and this tour would be an excuse to go there and cause trouble. We probably stayed up partying until 2 or 3 in the morning, but Gigi was the first to fall asleep, probably around 1. He was asleep on the floor, and this was a little apartment, and he was snoring super loud. Liz, me, and my girlfriend stayed up talking and listening to him snore for another hour. Finally, we set Liz up on the futon, and me and my girlfriend went to sleep on the bed, which is only a few feet away. We went to sleep to the sound of Gigi snoring, so I had no need to be alarmed. He wasn't blue, he didn't vomit, he was just snoring. But in the morning, at about 9 o'clock, Wiz wakes me up and says, "I think there's something wrong with Gigi." I went over to where Gigi was laying, and he was wearing a cutoff jean jacket, Liz's skirt, those boots, and a silver Nazi helmet that he loved. It was his most prized possession. He left the Nazi helmet at my house before the show because he loved it so much and did not want to lose it. So I go to him, and he's cold and he's stiff and very dead on my floor. I was still a little high from the night before, so I was confused, but I'm good in a crisis. I can focus on what has to be done. Little things drive me nuts. If I lose my keys, I go nuts. But if my grandfather dies, suddenly I'm going to organize everything and pay for it later. The first thing I did before anything was grab the remaining dope, run up to the and hide it because I knew what was going to happen next. Then I called Merle Allin, and I told him and called the police to tell them. I told the cops, "I think we have a death here." But I don't know if I ever admitted to the police that I was high as well. I wasn't afraid that the cops would charge me with murder. I was more afraid of getting busted for drugs, Gigi obviously was my really good friend, and there were more than a few people to say that I had no reason to kill him, so I wasn't really afraid of that. So they sent this cop over to determine that Gigi was dead. Then all the cops flooded my little apartment, and there was a cop standing outside my door for a couple hours. Finally, they put Gigi in a body bag. It was a 5th floor walk up, and they carried him down the stairs. It took a couple of guys because Gigi was a big fellow. They carried him down the street and put him in the wagon and drove him off to the morgue. One thing that I hadn't thought about that looked really weird and suspicious was that after Gigi fell asleep, Liz, my girlfriend, and I all took Polaroids of us laying next to Gigi that we were going to show him in the morning. We were cuddling with him and smiling in the photos. Well, the police found the Polaroids and confiscated them. And then we had to go down to the 9th precinct to tell our version of the story. At first, they were very suspicious of us. The cops were like, "What kind of fucking person lies down with a corpse and smiles and waves?" That's a good point. We had to explain that although he was in the exact same position, he wasn't dead and that he was snoring, but boy, did that not look too good for us. Now I can kind of get a kick out of it, but at the time it seemed like, fuck, that's really sick. Anyway, when all of this was over, they found that none of us did anything criminal. I tried for weeks to get those Polaroids back, but the cops just refused, and I don't know whatever happened to them. I'm sure they're in a folder somewhere at the 9th precinct. I think Gigi would have thought that it was funny. I think that he would have loved that story. He'd be like, the police thought that Johnny Puke was posing with my corpse. So it was Johnny Puke the whole time. This article was written by Punk magazine co-founder Legs McNeil. It originally ran in Vice, which has shamelessly been ripping off Punk magazine since 1994. So there's one final piece to this. We have the footage from the gas station show. Not only is this the footage, this is the last footage of Gigi Allin, like, alive.